The Hunger Games became a spectacle of the capital, but who would have guessed it began as a school project? From snake mutts to jabberjays to poisonous presidents, this is everything you need to know about Suzanne Collins's post-apocalyptic world. Like every post-apocalyptic story, the Hunger Games books and the franchise they spawned are set after a devastating series of events that nearly decimated the Earth's population. While the events in question may have been central for establishing the Hunger Games universe, Suzanne Collins made the choice to keep details of the transition period between our world and her story's world as vague as possible. Therefore, we know that the Hunger Games takes place in an indeterminate future, on an Earth that was ravaged by climate change and massive world wars. With the human population drastically reduced and chains of supply for basic human needs completely reconfigured, old governments fell apart, and with them the entire political world order. The remaining few people and organizations scrambled for control of the remaining resources, creating new governments in the process. At some point, all that also became true of the United States, which ceased to exist as we know it. Later, a new nation-state called Panem was founded in North America, encompassing the people who still lived there after the Old World's destruction. Divided into 13 districts, little has been revealed about Panem's establishment and how its government was instituted, but it wound up a utilitarian dictatorship with a political order enforced by brutal policing. It is in this setting that every published Hunger Games story has taken place.
This is how we remember our past. This is how we safeguard our future.
Before the creation of the Hunger Games, the political and economic system that remained almost until the end of the book's story was already in place. The government extracted resources from all the districts by force, and those resources funded the affluent society of the capital, the home to all the socio-political power in Panem. The capital itself was founded when some of the country's richest and most powerful families came together to build an entire city just for the Panem elite. Naturally, the citizens of the districts were unhappy living miserable existences under the constant threat of military repression, all just to have the fruit of their labor snatched away to prop up the lavish lifestyles of the capital. 3 years before the first Hunger Games, that widespread social dissatisfaction sparked the first rebellion against the capital, which then became a full-blown civil war. The rebel side of the war was led by District 13, Panem's leading manufacturer of weaponry and military technology. While the capital had no qualms about resorting to inhumane tactics and technologically enhanced violence to quash uprisings, the rebels managed to gain ground over time with a combination of guerrilla tactics and the technology supplied by District 13. However, the capital did eventually regain control after a failed invasion attempt by the rebels. At that point, not wanting to escalate matters into a nuclear war, District 13 withdrew its support for the rebellion and signed a ceasefire with the capital in exchange for its independence. District 13 proceeded to establish an entirely underground infrastructure, while everything above was carpet-bombed to give the appearance that the capital won the war. As a result, the rebels' war efforts were quelled entirely. To decisively mark the rebellion's conclusion, the Panem government wrote the Treaty of Treason, introducing a new set of national laws intended to nip any future subversive activity in the bud. The most notable of those laws created the Hunger Games, which were conceived jokingly by former university student Casca Highbottom during a drunken rant as part of a school project. Much to Casca's chagrin, this instructor for whom the assignment was completed, Dr. Volumnia Gall, eventually dug up Casca's proposal and presented it to the government to be fully enacted. Once in place, the Hunger Games became an annual event in which 2 teenagers from each of the districts, known as tributes, would be randomly selected or reaped into a nationally televised fight to the death. For the first few installations, the Hunger Games were held annually in the Capitol Arena, the same amphitheater used for public executions during the war. The first editions were somewhat rudimentary, lacking many of the features that would come to define future games, such as mentors, tribute interviews, tracking devices, massive high-tech arenas, genetically modified predatory mutts, and uniforms.
I'm Lucky Flickerman, first ever host of the Hunger Games.
The 10th Hunger Games was the first to introduce several of those features, including mentors. However, rather than mentors being past winners of the games, the first version of this concept saw 24 seniors from a prestigious Capitol high school called upon to train that year's new tributes. One such mentor was Coriolanus Snow, the son of late Capitol General Crassus Snow, who was assigned to mentor District 12 tribute Lucy Gray Baird and eventually fell in love with her. It was at Coriolanus' suggestion that the 10th Games introduced sponsorships and betting, which would contribute to consolidating them as a major event in the capital's pop culture and economy. Under Volumnia Gall's supervision, the 10th Games proved disastrous, with some tributes killing their mentors and being executed before the games even began. Things got even more out of hand when mysteriously placed bombs went off during a tour of the arena, killing several more tributes and mentors. Nevertheless, the games took place as planned, and after 5 days of carnage, Lucy Gray Baird emerged as the first victor to hail from District 12. The years following the Treaty of Treason were a period of reconstruction for the capital. The Snow family, whose wealth came from Crassus Snow's District 13-based munitions empire, faced a particularly brutal fall from grace in the wake of the rebellion and had been left in shambles when their patriarch died during the war. Thus, the responsibility to rebuild the Snow dynasty was left to Coriolanus and his cousin Tigris. For this reason, when he was given the opportunity to work as a mentor, he vowed to have his tribute win by any means necessary. It was eventually discovered that he had tampered with the snake mutts created by Gaul for the games so that they wouldn't attack Lucy Gray. As punishment, he was forced to enroll in Panem's military police, the Peacekeepers. Snow asked to be assigned to Lucy Gray's District 12, where he gained Gaul's favor by ratting out a rebellion to her using a recording bird mutt known as a jabberjay. He was eventually given an honorable discharge, taken under Gaul's wing, and flown out to attend his new mentor's class at the capital's university. Under Gaul, he became an apprentice game maker and rose rapidly through the game's administrative ranks with his creativity and merciless cunning. Lucy Gray, whom Snow might or might not have killed during a dazed altercation while the two were attempting to flee north together, was never heard from again. Over the years, the Hunger Games grew in popularity as an entertainment spectacle and proved an efficient means of quelling dissent in the districts as they forced the populace to focus more and more on surviving the games instead of opposing them. Since tributes could volunteer, the figure of the career tribute, a tribute from the wealthiest non-capital districts trained from an early age to excel in the games, was eventually born, and Districts 1, 2, and 4 began to dominate the games as a result. The 25th Games introduced the concept of the Quarter Quell, a special edition of the games with unique rules held every 25 years.
It's what we game makers like to call a wrinkle.
The first Quarter Quell saw tributes selected by voting among each district's population instead of randomly reaped. The second featured double the usual number of tributes and was won by Hamish Abernathy. The only surviving District 12 victor by the time the events of the Hunger Games began, Hamish used an unorthodox stunt to secure his victory in the games. Having become president of Panem by that point, Coriolanus Snow had his entire family executed as punishment. Katniss Everdeen was born on May 8th in the year of the 58th Hunger Games. The daughter of a miner and a healer, she grew up in the abject poverty typical of District 12's population. Her sister Primrose, or Prim Everdeen, arrived 4 years later. Due to the family's poverty, food was often scarce in the Everdeen household, and as she got older, Katniss learned from her father to go hunting in the woods for extra food and supplies. The pair formed a strong bond, and together they honed her archery and survival skills. When Katniss was 11, her father died in a mining explosion along with several other workers, including Gale Hawthorne's father. This tragedy left Katniss's mother in a prolonged near catatonic state, unable to work or interact with her daughters. As a result, Katniss was forced to become the family's breadwinner. Although Katniss managed to make ends meet for the most part, poaching and trading in the hob weren't always enough to keep the family fed. On one occasion, her family ran out of food completely, but was saved from starvation when the local baker's son, Peeta Malark, covertly gave Katniss some bread. Katniss eventually met Gale while hunting, and the two became best friends and mutual supporters. Gale was secretly a political dissident who dreamed of revolution against the capital. But Katniss, although deeply altruistic and devoted to the well-being of her loved ones, was uninterested in politics and harbored no dreams of a better world. During the reaping for the 74th Hunger Games, Prim's name was drafted, prompting a desperate Katniss to impulsively volunteer as tribute in her place. Peeta was reaped as District 12's male tribute, and the two were taken to the capital to participate in the games while Gale vowed to provide for Katniss's family in her absence. On their trip to the capital, Katniss and Peeta were accompanied by Hamish, who had slipped into alcoholism since his win, and their capital-assigned escort Effie Trinket. During preparations for the games, Katniss bonded closely with her stylist Cinna, whose bold fire-themed designs boosted Katniss's profile and inspired the moniker Girl on Fire. Thanks to a strong performance in training and a defiant archery stunt during her private demonstration with the Game Makers, Katniss was deemed one of the favorites for the 74th Games. Meanwhile, Peeta publicly professed his love for Katniss during his tribute interview, claiming it was a strategy to draw audience sympathy.
He did you a favor.
He made me look weak.
He made you look desirable, which in your case can't hurt, sweetheart.
During the 74th Games, Peeta initially allied with the career tributes, though he turned on them to save Katniss and was almost killed as a result. Katniss allied and befriended the 12-year-old District 11 tribute, Rue. After a career tribute killed Rue, Katniss staged an impromptu funeral for her, wreathing her body in flowers. The act sparked spontaneous civil unrest in District 11. Shortly after Rue's death, the game makers announced a rule allowing 2 tributes from the same district to win together.
From now on, 2 victors may be crowned if both originate from the same district.
With the possibility that they could both go home, Katniss and Peeta joined forces, playing up their love story to win over sponsors. The 2 of them succeeded in killing or outliving every other tribute, only for the new rule to be revoked. Unwilling to choose who would die, they made a suicide pact and were about to eat poisonous berries when the Capitol declared them both victors. The 74th game's head game maker, Seneca Crane, was executed for fumbling the game's resolution. Meanwhile, following their pioneering double win, Katniss and Peeta returned to District 12. Having won the games, they were presented with all the benefits and luxuries of Victor life, including new houses next to Haymitch's in the Victor's Village. Despite this, Katniss continued to hunt in the woods out of habit. She was eventually visited by President Snow, who explained that her and Peeta's near suicide had sparked revolutionary sentiment around Panem, and instructed her to convince the nation that she had done it not out of spite for the capital, but out of love. Katniss and Peeta then embarked on their victory tour of the districts, in which they saw firsthand how widespread social unrest had become. During the tour, Katniss and Peeta bonded over their shared trauma, and Katniss grew to develop genuine romantic feelings for Peeta. However, despite their best efforts to convince Panem of their mad love for each other and their support for the capital, Katniss and Peeta's performance in the tour failed to demobilize uprisings. A 2-day riot in District 8 took place before being suppressed by peacekeepers, and policing around Panem became more severe. As part of the new security in Panem, District 12 received a new head peacekeeper. Romulus Thread dramatically increased the police's brutality in District 12, arresting and whipping Gale in the town square when he was caught poaching. At the same time, District 12 was struck by a harsh winter, and Katniss felt alienated from her community. In an attempt to convince Panem of their love, Katniss and Peeta got engaged while on tour, and endless wedding preparations were thrust upon her while most of the populace starved and suffered. As if things couldn't get any worse, President Snow then announced the special rule for the 3rd Quarter Quell at the 75th Hunger Games. This time around, tributes were to be reaped from the existing pool of victors. Therefore, Katniss, as District 12's only living female victor, was guaranteed to participate in the games again. She, Haymitch, and Peeta spent the following months training, with Katniss and Haymitch ultimately being reaped. Unsurprisingly, Peeta volunteered in Haymitch's place to protect Katniss. The lead-up to the 75th Games was fraught with anger and indignation from the returning tributes. During the televised interviews, the tributes made desperate pleas for the games to be canceled and managed to win over Capitol audiences' sympathy. These efforts culminated in a display during Katniss and Peeta's tribute interviews. While wearing a wedding gown designed by Cinna, her outfit transformed into a black Mockingjay-shaped dress when she gave it a spin. In turn, Peeta made the false revelation that Katniss was pregnant. These tactics proved so effective in evoking sympathy from viewers, protests against the games even occurred in the Capitol. Despite the show of unity from the tributes during the televised interviews, the games continued as planned. Right before Katniss entered the arena, Cinna was brutally beaten by peacekeepers. Still in shock, Katniss and Peeta quickly allied with District 4 tributes Finnick Odair and Mags after receiving a covert message from Haymitch encouraging the alliance. The 80-year-old Mags ended up sacrificing herself to save the rest from a poisonous fog. The group then teamed up with technical geniuses Beatty and Wyrus from District 3 and loose cannon Joanna Mason from District 7.
Hickory dickory dock, the dog barked at the clock.
Remembering a clue given to her by new head game maker Plutarch Heavensby during the Victory Tour, Katniss realized that the arena was designed like a clock, with hazards filling up one of 12 sectors every hour. With that knowledge and some unexpected help from other competitors, her group managed to outlast all but the career tributes. They then geared up for a final confrontation with the careers, using a strategy devised by Beatty. The plan was to fire an arrow charged by a lightning bolt that struck the arena every 12 hours at the remaining careers. However, just as Katniss was about to shoot the arrow, she realized that Beatty, Finnick, and Joanna were actually carrying out a plan to destroy the arena, not to win the games. She then fired an arrow at the venue's force field, blowing it up. In the ensuing chaos from the destruction of the arena, Katniss was knocked unconscious and extracted from the arena in a rebel aircraft along with Beatty and Finnick. The Capitol, however, captured Peeta, Joanna, and the last surviving career tribute, Enobaria. Waking up in the aircraft, Katniss was informed by Beatty, Finnick, Haymitch, and Plutarch Heavensby that they were all part of a secret movement against the Capitol, and that half the tributes were involved in a plan to rescue Katniss. They further explained that she had become a national symbol of insurgents, a plan Katniss herself had been left in the dark about due to Snow's constant vigilance over her. They set course for District 13, the home base of the new resistance movement. Meanwhile, inspired by the destruction of the game's arena, the Second Rebellion erupted across most Panem districts. In retaliation against Katniss, the Panem government bombed all of District 12, leaving only a handful of survivors, including Katniss's family and Gale. The survivors were eventually discovered and rescued by District 13 forces. In District 13, Katniss reunited with Gale, Effie, and her family and met President Alma Coin. Acting as the rebellion's de facto leader, Coin tried to persuade Katniss to become the Mockingjay, an official media figurehead for the rebellion. Katniss hesitated at first, but agreed after seeing that Peeta was being forced to act as a figurehead for the Capitol. Plutarch Heavensbee then oversaw the production of pirate propaganda transmissions known as propos, starring Katniss as the rebellion's symbolic heroine. In one, Katniss spontaneously sang The Hanging Tree, a controversial song she learned from her father, which became a nationwide anthem for the rebellion. Armed by District 13 and boosted by Katniss's symbolic leadership, the rebels managed to gradually secure the districts one by one. The Capitol arranged to retaliate against 13 with a missile strike, but Peeta was able to warn them during an unhinged TV appearance. With a few extra minutes before the attack, everyone in 13 evacuated into a bunker just in time to avoid the missiles. Following the bombing, Katniss was left in despair at Peeta's rapidly deteriorating mental and physical condition. Simultaneously, Finnick was going through similar emotional turmoil as his girlfriend, fellow victor Annie Cresta, had also been captured by the Capitol. Katniss and Finnick attempted to film a propo informing people that District 13 had survived the bombing but couldn't perform due to their frayed emotional state. Meanwhile, President Coin's second-in-command Boggs oversaw an operation to infiltrate the Capitol and rescue Peeta, Annie, and Joanna. Upon their return, Peeta attempted to strangle Katniss, as the Capitol had used hallucinogenic venom to brainwash him into believing Katniss to be a murderous mutt intent on killing him. Peeta was forcibly hospitalized and spent the following weeks being treated by District 13 doctors, while a horrified Katniss requested to join combat operations to be away from him. Katniss and Gale proceeded to take part in the securing of District 2, the last district to remain loyal to the Capitol.
District 12, District 2, we have no fight. Except the one the Capitol gave us.
While on the field, Katniss succeeded in rallying District 2 citizens into joining the rebellion, but was shot in an assassination attempt. However, her official Mockingjay outfit was designed to be bulletproof by Cinna, so she survived with only minor injuries. Having lost District 2 and its air fleet, the Capitol had no hope of making any further offensive strides in the war, leaving its peacekeepers to retreat into the city and await the rebels' invasion. Meanwhile, the rebels prepared for the final campaign, and Finnick and Annie got married in a nationally broadcast propo. The Battle of the Capitol began, with Katniss joining a special propaganda unit known as Squad 451, which also included Boggs, Gale, Finnick, a film crew, and a slowly recovering Peeta. While invading the Capitol, the rebels faced deadly technological traps known as pods. Boggs and several other team members perished in the journey, and the rest of Squad 451 was presumed dead due to footage surfacing of the destruction of a building in which they had recently hidden. Led by Katniss, they then decided to use their incognito status to infiltrate Snow's mansion and kill him. On the way to the mansion, however, Finnick and many others were slain by mutts. The survivors sheltered at an elderly tigress's clothing shop who had befriended the rebellion after being spurned by her cousin. Katniss and Gale then attempted to blend into the Capitol citizens being welcomed into Snow's mansion for shelter. However, they got caught up in the bombing of the city circle, which killed a crowd of Capitol children presumably being used as last-ditch human shields by Snow. Tragically, this bombing also resulted in the deaths of Prim and many other District 13 medics. The deaths of the Capitol children prompted the last of the Capitol's forces to relent, allowing the rebels to easily take over. Snow was arrested and sentenced to death, but when Katniss went to face him one last time, he revealed to her that the city circle bombing had not been ordered by him, but by Coin. As a result, Katniss became permanently estranged from Gale, who she believed designed the bombs that killed Prim. Spurred by Coin, the 7 surviving victors took a vote on whether to hold a final edition of the Hunger Games with Capitol teenagers. Joanna and Enobaria supported the idea, while Beetee and Annie vehemently opposed it. Although the proposition disgusted Peeta, Katniss voted in favor of it on the condition that she be allowed to execute Snow herself. Haymitch followed her vote, trusting her intentions.
I'm with the Mockingjay.
Then, during Snow's execution at a public arena, Katniss fired her arrow at Coin at the very last moment, killing her instead. This sent Snow into a maniacal laughing fit, and the crowd stormed the arena and murdered their former president with their bare hands. Following Coin's death, Katniss was arrested, though her life was spared. She returned to District 12 and began to rebuild it alongside the district's remaining survivors, Haymitch and Peeta. The Panem government held an election to choose a new president, and Commander Paler, the former leader of the District 8 rebel forces, was elected. In turn, Plutarch enjoyed a high-ranking position in the new Republican government. A few months later, Annie and Finnick's son was born. All past Hunger Games arenas were demolished to make room for memorials. Back in District 12, the coal mines were closed and replaced by a more prosperous agricultural economy with the help of capital machinery. Peeta, now nearly fully recovered, managed to reconnect with Katniss, and although still suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, the two eventually rekindled their love, settled down together, and went on to have 2 children.